glad to be here with you, and Warren, thank you for inviting me. It doesn't matter how many we have, because what matters is that you're interested and you got to get something out of it. Take it back, like he said, to your neighbors and spread the word. We're all about protecting homes. I am, as I said, with the commission. There's two of us as far as field coordinators. I'm up here in the upstate with 24 of the 46 counties in the state. Drake's on the coast. We have a state liaison in Columbia that helps to deal with the folks on the federal level. And what I'm going to talk about is some basics of fire, some history of fire in South Carolina, and then from that and how that relates to our Firewise program. I don't know how much you're aware of it, but we live in a landscape that was shaped by fire. Before man ever came on the scene, we had lightning fires that burned, and they kind of meandered around and created a patchwork of habitat, and it helped to keep the fuels down. Native Americans came on the scene. They saw what was happening naturally. They took the fire. They decided they would use it. They drove game with it. They cleaned out around their villages with it. And then when early settlers came in, they saw what the Native Americans were doing and how it was working, and they decided to borrow that too, and used it for clearing land, for crops, for whatever. And the map you see is the shaded areas were areas where settlers, early man, had an impact by fire on the landscape. And because of that, you had a lot of open stands like this was seen from Georgia in about 1850. And then we had our logging in the late 1800s, early 1900s, big logging operations, left a lot of slash behind, and we had some really destructive fires from that logging slash. In the early 1900s also, the U.S. Forest Service was getting started, and the practice then was put the fire out as quick as you can put it out, because we're trying to protect lives. And that worked good. In the 1940s, Smokey Bear came on because of the little cub that was found hanging on a tree in New Mexico from a fire. Come on in, we're just getting started. And it became one of the most successful ad campaigns ever. And you may remember, most of you have been around, Smokey said, only you can prevent forest fires. 15 years ago or so, it changed to only you can prevent wildfires, understanding that fire is a good thing to be used as a tool. And in the last several years, we've had a lot of folks moving in from different parts of the country that don't understand that this area around here had fire historically. And most of them, or a lot of them, came from cities where they never dealt with fire, or the only thing they saw was in a fireplace, so they don't really understand it. They, of course, don't, like most of us, don't like to smoke, so they complain to their congressman and whatever else, and it's sometimes a little bit hard for them to understand the situation we're in. And because of all that buildup of fuel, because of the fires being suppressed so well, we've had a lot of large fires, most notably out west, but occasionally we get a headline like this one. This was not out west, where you see most of the fires, like California just recently in the wine country. This was our Highway 31 fire in April of 2009. Started on Earth Day. It was windy all across the state, extremely windy. I was in Gaffney doing a presentation, and the tree was just rocking back and forth. This started from a debris fire that was put out twice by the local fire department. Down there in the Myrtle Beach area, you've got a lot of organic fuels, a lot of peat in the soil, and fire will go underground and you don't realize it's still burning. And that's what happened with this fire. When it got out the third time, it was on that windy day, and it moved very rapidly. And you see it burned over 19,000 acres, over $20 million in home losses. I'm going to turn a little bit. You may notice that even though this is all burned back here, there's a lot of green grass around those homes, and yet those homes are gone. What caused the home loss was embers flying in from a mile or more away, landing in flammable fuels, in this case pine straw, next to vulnerable siding like vinyl or wood. And then we had those 76 homes and lost and 97 damaged. We had another fire a few years later, same area between Conway and Myrtle Beach. This one came out of the woods. The wood line was about 10 to 15 feet from the first condominium unit. Again, there was pine straw next to vinyl siding, and once that caught and that first condominium unit caught, which was right back in there, the high winds pushed it in across the ponds, and within an hour and a half, you see what the destruction was: 24 acres and 108 condominiums totally gone. I'm going to touch on one more fire, and this is in the upstate, and this is not a wildland fire in any stretch. It was in a very developed area. It's near Greer. It was pure grass fire, pretty much. Cigarette was thrown out of a window. It was a dry day, windy, landed in pine straw that was on a little earthen berm, and there was a lot of flammable trees like Leland cypress and cryptomeria along there. It came over that berm into the community. The grass was, we think, Bermuda, very thick. The thatch had never been removed from it. It was very dry because of that. And 2 fire chiefs estimated flame length in the grass from 4 to 6 feet going across there. Most of the community is brick. There's some condominiums down here that are vinyl siding, but the biggest damage, other than the 3 condominiums that were lost here, were to all those brick homes. This is the first brick home that was impacted. That vinyl soffit, I'm estimating based on the height of the windows, is about 4 feet hanging there. There was pine straw along the edge of the house and underneath the edge of the deck there. Flamed up in that corner and created enough heat to melt that soffit. Fortunately, the wind was pushing it by that house and moved it on down before it did any more damage. However, when it got to the corner, it got to this house, flames coming in, it got in behind the house and kind of swirled. Again, there was pine straw next to a wood deck, and in this case, the pine straw caught the wood deck, which in turn created enough heat to blow through 2 double pane windows. The next slide is going to show a security camera video from inside that house. It's about 55 seconds long. You'll see when it starts that the flames are already starting. You can see the flames building up outside. And in about 10 or 11 seconds, smoke starts to come in around the door. Another 10 seconds or so, it starts melting the frame of that window. And in very short order, the window breaks. By the time the fire department got there, this house was involved enough, they wrote it off. Started trying to save the houses on either side. You notice how much smoke there is in there. I did this presentation in another part of the county, and the fire chief very quickly pointed to that. And you see all these movies and TV shows and whatnot where you see people moving around in a smoky room. This is more realistic when it's full of smoke and the only way you can get around is on the floor. Talked about 3 fires, and there's commonalities in those 3 fires. One is that they all had pine straw mulch mandated by the developer. Even though those brick homes were brick, they were all impacted. In the other 2 cases, you got vulnerable siding that either melted enough to get the OSB exposed behind them or some other reason for it to get into that material. So you got that, and what we talk about with Firewise is little things like cleaning up, getting that pine straw taken away from your house, putting in other mulches like I'm going to talk about later, the shredded hardwood or non-flammable mulch like decorative stone is a much better option. Since Pinnacle Mountain is so close, and tonight actually, is the year anniversary because it started on November 9th last year near Table Rock State Park. The positive about this fire is even though it burned 10,623 acres, there were no home losses, no home damage, and no lives lost. And as far as we know, there were no injuries on the fire. There was someone that had an injury, but it wasn't related to the fire itself. We had an incident management team that's part of, it was within the Forestry Commission, that did an excellent job along with the local fire departments helping out. Some of y'all probably sent some food or whatever over there to help out, and we appreciate that. But we also had to bring in outside help from other states, which is the first time in our 90-year history we've had to do that. That's the footprint of the fire. The red is Table Rock State Park. Down here is DNR property in the blue. This purple is all Greenville watershed. And up in there with the green, it got over into North Carolina a little bit and burned a little bit of private property over on the east. But again, our folks did an excellent job of getting that under control. During that fire, we had a high wind weekend and we knew it was coming. And because of it pushing where it was expected to push, the local fire departments and our team got out on the ground and talked to the landowners and homeowners, and very much about what I'm talking about tonight, how to protect your home, how to do small things like cleaning out around your home, cleaning out the gutters, those kind of things to protect them. That was a very dry fall, as you may remember. This was a screenshot I got online the day before that fire started. And that was the fires at that point. Since that fire, you had Lake Lure, you had Gatlinburg, our Pinnacle Mountain, of course. A lot of stuff going on there. And the reason I bring that up is the predictions for November are for it to be dry and high fire potential for most of the state in the southeast. Fortunately, the last 2 days we've gotten some good rain. It's been slow, not a whole lot, but it's been wet, and hopefully it won't dry off too quickly. More statistics, or gives you some statistics rather. We do have wildland fires every day in South Carolina almost. Our forest protection chief made a statement last fall, about a year ago, that within the last several years there'd only been 11 days without a fire somewhere in the state. That's in the upstate, basically the Piedmont region, for the commission. That's zoomed in a little bit on Greenville and Spartanburg County. This is an 11-year period. We also have other fires around the state. These are folks that call in on our notification system to do debris burning, or they're doing land clearing and they have to have a large pile burned, those kind of things. And unfortunately, some of those get out. So we have to take care of those. Along with that, we've got increased population. We talked about population moving in other areas. Strom Thurmond Institute at Clemson and Upstate Forever did a study in 2008, taking the 1990 census and projecting toward 2030. This is the 1990 census. At that time, they projected 2015 urban growth, residential growth to be that, and a lot of what I've seen since then is matched that. And then for 2030, they're looking for it to be that, all that in red. And of course, what I've got up in top is the area up here where the Landrum Fire District is. So you've probably seen a good bit of growth from that. We have on average about 2,500 fires a year. This is a 10-year average. A few years ago, it was up about 3,000. Unfortunately, in the last few years, we've had less. And of those fires, most of them are debris burns that have gotten out of control. And unfortunately, we have people that like to burn just to be burning. and then other human causes like campfires, power lines, railroads, smoking, whatever are the others. And way down here at the bottom is the 2.5% that's caused by lightning, by nature. So we cause most of our fires, and we know how to put them out. If we just try to prevent them, we'd be in a lot better shape. We lose homes every year. We lose about 40 homes on average. Again, this is a 10-year average. Early this year, I looked at our statistics, and from January through June, we had structure losses on the fires that we fought from $23,000 up to $200,000. When you get into the 100,000 plus range, we know we're probably talking about either a home or some business. All that occurs in what we call the wildland-urban interface. That's that area where we live in nature, where we live next to the wildland, the grasslands, the forest. Of course, living there and having a lot of fire and smoke don't go very well. Warren asked me about where this was. This is near Myrtle Beach again. This is the Legends fire in the mid-2000s. We use two terms. We use an interface, which is where there are multiple structures that are surrounded by woodland, and then we have intermixed, which you have various single homes spread out. We know I have a lot of issues with development in forest, in the woodland. We've got ingress and egress. A lot of communities up here, you have only one way in, one way out. We've got the cul-de-sacs and the dead-end roads, and in some cases you don't have any turnaround at the end of the dead-end roads. You got some fairly narrow roads, some of which don't have shoulders. And I want you to imagine trying to get out of that road when it's like this. That's the dash cam video, or a still from a dash cam video on the Highway 31 fire in Myrtle Beach. You see his lights, you see a home burning. He is actually on the side of the road. He's on the shoulder. He's not on the other road because he's leaving that open for folks to get out. And then we deal with situations like this where it's difficult to see a home at all during the daylight, and think about you firefighters trying to find that when it's smoky, it's dark, trying to find a driveway, whatever. You've got very limited access. But we know how to minimize those losses. There's been a lot of studies done over many years, and they've taught us a lot. We get money from the federal government through the National Fire Plan. This was enacted when there was that disastrous fire, like there had been this year out west. And Congress decided to allocate money. Some of that comes to us in South Carolina, with our goal being to raise awareness like we're trying to do tonight. Hopefully to lessen anxiety to the fire when it's around, and show you what you can do to protect your home. We have a 5-step plan. Identifying at-risk communities. We started in 2003, looking all over the state at communities that were at risk for wildfire. We conducted community assessments. To date, we've done over 1,000 assessments throughout the state. We developed action plans. We did a community wildfire protection plan for the Landrum Fire District and the neighboring districts. And we can do the same thing. We've done many of them for communities within the state. Conduct homeowner and community workshops similar to this, and we sponsor fuel mitigation projects through grants. I'm now going to go to what we saw in the Landrum Fire District when we did our assessment and show you what you can do to hopefully increase the chance of your home surviving. This is just the footprint of the entire district, and Warren and Caleb went with us, drove all around, along with our local county supervisor, looking at the whole county, including, and then also in the Greenville County up in the Lake Lanier area and some of that really steep land and down there by the lake. And what we looked at was the roads. I showed you a road earlier. Some of the roads the land is fairly steep. We looked at the forest cover. A lot of it's hardwood, but there's a lot of pine mixed in. and there's a lot of thickets of mountain laurel. A lot of people like mountain laurel, but it is very, very flammable. A lot of the fuels you have up here are the hardwood leaves and pine straw mixed. You got really thick patches of pine in some cases. Down here is the mountain laurel. And then you got a lot of deadwood on the ground that, even though it might take a while to burn, it burns for a long, long time and creates a lot of smoke. It can add to the intensity. Fortunately, you haven't had a whole lot of fires, at least that we're aware of here. The only statistics I have are those that were reported to the Forestry Commission. Over an 11-year period, you only had 8 reported to us. I know there have been others that the fire department has put out, roadside fires, brush fires, but again, debris burning is the primary cause up here. You got some good roads here, but you also have some very narrow ones with a gravel. Some of them have winding driveways. Driveways sometimes are very long, a little bit difficult to get into. A plus is that your road signs are all reflective, 4-inch letters, metal post. You do have addresses at your driveways, which is good to be able to locate a home. There are a few places in the fire district where electricity is underground, which is also a positive Firewise factor, but that's got a lot of debris around it. Most of the homes are pretty spread out. You don't have a whole lot of places other than maybe in town where homes are fairly close together, so structure to structure fire spread is limited for the most part, but again, you have to think about the embers that could be falling from those. Homes are mostly site built, which is good. A few mobile homes scattered around, but most of those were in pretty decent shape. What we saw though was most of the homes have vulnerable siding, either wood or vinyl. There are a few with brick. Most of the roofs are fiberglass composite, but as you see there, you got a lot of debris on that roof and coming down toward the gutter. And I think that gutter's probably got a gutter guard of some sort on it, but anytime you've got gutters that have that kind of debris, if the fire or if heat can get up underneath those shingles, of course that is a hazard to the house. The eaves and crawl spaces and vents we saw were all enclosed and screened apparently, which is good. Keeps those embers from going in the house. We looked at a few homes that had fences. I know there's some that have porches, maybe 2, and sometimes underneath those porches is open where debris can blow in, and we know that wherever leaves and pine needles blow in, also embers can do the same thing and create some problems. And particularly when the fence is right next to the house, anything that's connected to the home is considered part of the home. So we've had some fires that came in that way and impacted the home. There are a good many chimneys, and a lot of them have either chimney caps and or screen spark arresters. Those are great. Keeps the embers from inside the house from coming out and landing in the yard. We looked at landscaping, and fortunately up here you don't have much pine straw. Most of it is hardwood mulch, which is great. You just need to be sure and keep it moist. The plants we saw though, we did see some like this that were fairly low and succulent, but we also saw, as you see in the bottom, arborvitae right next to a wood home. And even though these little trees are next to stone right there, they're tall enough to where they can get up under that corner, get in the roof. And I'm going to show you now what can happen with something even smaller than that. There was a fire in the early 2000s over on Lake Huey. The homeowner was burning a little bit of trash in his can. Wind got up, blew it over, either landed in pine straw or came across the grass, eventually got up to the house. Off of the picture is a garage, and there were 2 small trees, conifers, on either side of that garage. That's what one of them looked after the fire. It got in that conifer, got hot enough to get in behind the vinyl, into the OSB, and went to the roof. That's what that conifer is, because that's on the other side of the driveway. And you wouldn't think necessarily that small a tree could burn a house, but in that case it did. We look at defensible space. That's a managed space around the home that's open enough that we as firefighters can get in to fight the fire, and also managed where you've got less fuel to contribute to the fire spread. And unfortunately, you got a good and bad here. You got a really nice open lot with a lot of room around it, and then on the other side, you got a lot of trees right up against the house, which makes it difficult for us to get in. Graphic representation, we look at 30 feet. 30 feet minimum is recommended based on research done out west of flame front pushing toward monitors that indicated that at 33 feet or 10 meters, vinyl would melt, wood would blacken but not burn. That's where we get our 30 feet from. We also look at 5 feet. We don't want anything flammable within that 5 feet zone of the foundation that can impact any part of the home. And I talked about decking and the porches having open spaces. We recommend lattice backed by screen of 1/8 inch or less openings. Good roof. See, the fellow over here is trimming off limbs that might be over the house and dropping debris. And of course, here the lady is watering down her yard, keeping it nice and moist. We're not talking about cutting everything in the yard. We're just talking about opening it up. It's just a before and after kind of thing that shows how we can still have shrubs around the house. We can still have trees in the yard, but it's not a solid stand of trees that will carry the flames. You've got a good fire department here. But you've got some issues with time of response based primarily on the distance to where they're going in some of those outer areas, and also getting into some of those narrow roads that might take a little while to get into. And of course, we are fortunate with the Forestry Commission in that we have 2 wardens living right down the road. But again, it depends on whether they're on duty or not when they can get to you. Looking at hazard mitigation, one of the biggest things that's fairly simple for most folks is getting the roofs and gutters cleaned out. This is a picture from down around the Kershaw County area, but you got a concrete block house, but you got a lot of debris built up in this gutter and right up in that along that edge. Embers falling in there, igniting that, burning that wood fascia, or getting up under the shingles. And even though it's a concrete block house, it could be gone like the other one I showed you. We look at cleaning out, as I talked about, the 5-foot zone, clearing out the fine fuels, the smaller fuels around the home, right next to the home. Just some loose leaves there, and it's a low porch, but there's vinyl along the edge of that low porch that if you get enough heat could melt, get into the structures underneath, cause that to burn. Much rather see hardwood mulch. It too will burn if it's dry enough. Usually it gives a low flame, it's easier to control, doesn't create as much heat, and if I say you keep it good and moist, it's a pretty good alternative. Of course, the best alternative is stone of some sort, crushed brick, lava rock, decorative stone, river rock, those kind of things. Totally non-flammable. And I have seen some communities that have taken, say, 3 feet of rock and then put hardwood mulch out away from it so that when the mower comes by, you're not hitting rock. Just another possibility. I've seen several places where people have done things to help themselves. Pampas grass is, again, very flammable. It's extremely flammable, and it's not recommended next to a house. However, what this landowner did, and this is just a mile or 2 down the road, is in the fall they cut it back. So that if you got a fire there, you don't have near the fire you had early before, and you don't have near the heat. If people are very attached to their arborvitae or other plants, this is in Greer. The homeowner there had it pruned from the bottom, and there's mulch, hardwood mulch down there, so the likelihood of flames reaching up and getting into that is very greatly reduced. Same community with Leland cypress. That is extremely flammable. I don't know how, it may not be that easy to see, but where the arrow is pointing is just dead limbs. And the fire in Greer that I mentioned earlier, there was, like I said, Leland cypress and cryptomeria along the roadway. It was at least 30 feet from the nearest home, and yet you had vinyl siding buckling from the heat created from those trees burning. Prune dead limbs, get that dead timber out of there. This homeowner decided to prune it up about 10 feet above the ground on his side. The other landowner hadn't done that, so there's still some danger there, but he's done what he could do on his side. We look at other things as far as defensible space, cleaning out the yard, having it open. I talked about, we're not talking about getting rid of all the trees. You've got a good lot there with some good trees, good shade, but still it's open, well watered. Over here, you had a lot of thick underbrush. They cleaned that out. Still left what looks like a fairly natural lot. I know you don't have that many utility cabinets here, but if you do, where you live, it's a good idea not to have anything going right around them. Get those cleaned out, because anything burning, particularly like the pampas grass there, creates enough heat that it can impact and melt some of the components inside. We talk about other things. We talk about fires starting from vehicles. We've had a lot of fires from chains dragging on the ground. I talked about structure fires and the embers that can fall from them. Of course, we've got external wildfires that may impact the area where you are, and the equipment use, you need good spark arresters on those as well. As far as the community itself, something you can do is have a Firewise committee. If you've got a homeowners association, it works good through the homeowners association, but if you don't, I've talked to some folks who don't have a homeowners association, and yet they've talked to their folks and they've decided we want to have a risk assessment and then have a plan. You've got a Firewise committee that helps to manage that. I talked about reducing fuels near homes. There's a red flag fire alert program that we help with. Whenever we have a red flag alert in the state, whenever the conditions are right for weather and not only the weather, but our possibility of responding, we'll let the fire departments know they can fly the red flag. You can also, as a community, ask to be in that program. We don't supply the flag, but we can let you know when we've got high fire danger, and you can alert your other folks in the neighborhood. And we looked at wildfire safety zones in the community. Some open space, if you've got a pond, if you've got a pool, if you've got a clubhouse that's open, someplace that, particularly if you've got a community where there's only one way in, one way out, a way to help get away from the fire. All of this is about personal preparedness and having your garden hose connected now back into the summer. As we go into the winter, you might want to take it off, but have it close where you can hook it up again, wet things down. Several of the homes on the Highway 31 fire were saved because homeowners got out at 2 a.m. in the morning and wet down their pine straw and wet their neighbor's pine straw down because they saw what was happening. Folks, of course, call 911 if you have fire suspected. Keeping your documents in a fireproof box is very important, because that way you've got them where you can grab them and take them out the door if you need to leave. I've got one of those that cost me $20 that I've got all my deeds and everything in it. I can put a CD or a flash drive with pictures from the home, anything I need, have it at the door, be ready. Be ready to evacuate is important. That document box, get your windows and garage doors closed. If you're on a sprinkler system and it doesn't impact the water in the hydrants, it's a good idea to turn those on. but be ready to evacuate. And if you got any idea that you need to evacuate, go ahead. Please don't wait for somebody to tell you. There was a couple in the California fires that they had packed up ready to leave. And they called their daughter twice. And she said, y'all need to go ahead. And they were still uncertain. And when they decided it was time to leave, they had to go to a neighbor's house, and they spent the night in the neighbor's pool, because that's how they survived the fire. They lost everything they had. They had their lives, but they lost everything they had. Of course, drive cautiously if you're having to leave. Watch for emergency vehicles. If any of you have seen any of the video, the dash cam video from the folks trying to get out of Gatlinburg fires, you know what I'm talking about. You can't see. You got stuff flying all over the place. You're trying to figure out where to go. You know. Anyway, that's a lot of what we talk about with the Firewise program. So what now? If you are in a community and you're interested in the Firewise program, I'll be glad to talk to you. In my bag over there, I've got a sign-up sheet. If you're interested, I can do an assessment for your community. We can do a plan for your community. We've got several resources online, of course, our website, and I also have a sheet that has these on it with our Firewise program information. The National Firewise program through the National Fire Protection Association has a lot of information. Most of it is free, and some of it is over here on the table, on the stage, that you can take later. We also have in South Carolina an Institute for Business and Home Safety that's paid for and run by the insurance industry. They do a lot of research. They have done at least 3 ember storm tests where they generated embers like you would find in a wildfire. They have a turntable in their facility that can build a full-size house. They put various siding on it, various gutters, various roof materials, to see what the impact was to that house. And those videos are available online. Lastly, the Ready, Set, Go program is usually through the fire departments. It's an International Association of Fire Chiefs program. It starts with the Firewise program. The Ready portion of it is the Firewise portion, being aware of what you can do yourself. The Set is having everything like that couple in California, having everything loaded up. If you think you got a problem, you need to leave. And the Go is being ready to go when either you feel unsafe or somebody tells you you need to evacuate. A lot of information there too. I have not that many of them, but for what we've got here tonight, I've got refrigerator magnets that have this list on it. That's an evacuation list, whether it's fire, whether it's hurricane, whatever it is. This is taken from the Red Cross, and it's basically what you heard when Hurricane Irma was coming through, of things you needed to go if you need to evacuate. What we tell people in talking about fire is it's not if we're going to have a big one, but when. We've known for a while we're going to have a big one. We had that with Pinnacle Mountain. That's the largest fire we've had in the upstate of South Carolina in the mountains. That was last year. I did a presentation like this at Table Rock State Park the night after, and we had a lot of interest, of course, because the fire had already started. What we don't want is that. What we do want is this. That's from Oregon last year, and you can see how hot that fire was to burn all those trees around it. But that landowner did something right. I don't know what it was, but they did something right. That's a log house, but it's still standing there, and it looks like it's virtually untouched by the fire. This is some contact information for us. Again, it's on that sheet I'll pull out in a few minutes. By our coordinator in Columbia, my information, and County Supervisor John Barker.